going. So I want to introduce Keck Tay. Keck is the CEO of the software company called PlanCube. Keck and I have worked together for many, many years when he was a strategic consultant at our company. Over the years, he's helped hundreds of companies with their strategic planning and building their project portfolios. He's then built a planning software company called PlanCube. It's such a unique planning situation that I've included in my upcoming book. So I've actually added dashboards in my new book, the PMO Lifecycle. So definitely want you guys to check that out. So I'd like to introduce you to my friend Keck Tay. Keck. All right, let's see what's wrong here. There we go. Sorry, Keck. All right, it should be good now. Sorry about that. Here we go.
Okay, good. Awesome. So let me kind of do a quick intro and run through of what we're going to cover this morning, and then and have a great discussion. And hopefully you'll find this very informative for yourselves and for your organization as well too. So here's the agenda that we're going to cover today. I'm going to introduce and give you a little bit about some background about myself, and then I want to share with you about what's going on today and why should we consider doing outcomes-based planning. I'll share with you also a case study of what some companies that you will have heard of and what they're doing in this area, and then and how they're successful as well too, and then just how to get started for your organization, and then with the time remaining, also answer any Q&A as well too. Okay. So just to kind of share with you guys a little bit about myself. So again, Keck Tay. I've got about 15 plus years of consulting experience, both at a number of actually consulting firms of Ernst & Young, Arthur Andersen, and KPMG. And then I also ran customer success for Apptio for their organization for the past 5 years, and which is a technology company. And we were, I was responsible for really doing the customer implementations and making sure that they were successful with the projects and using our software as well too. And then, just overall, a little tidbit of information. Worked with over hundreds of organizations over the years. And I was just talking to a friend of mine, and he and I were talking because he was a former consultant as well too. And he was like, I was like thinking about how many projects have we worked in. And he gave me a stat that reminded me, I've worked on over $1 billion worth of projects. And I thought, wow, that is a very cool metric to kind of measure. So lastly, just to kind of share with you also, about a year and a half ago, started a software company called PlanCube, just because I've seen a lot of software, portfolio management planning software out there in the marketplace, but nothing that really tracks about the outcomes. And so I decided and then especially for small, mid-sized organizations. So something that's simple and easy to use. So I decided to kind of launch that, and that's been a great journey, working with a number of customers and organizations about that as well too. So happy to share with you. And also, last but not least, and I had worked at Microsoft as well too, and that's where I met Bill actually, and we had a great time working together on a couple of projects as well too. So with that, let me kind of share with you what's going on. Why should we care? Why should we care about outcomes-based planning? So let me kind of tell you about the environment and the situation really. As project and program managers, it's really, I look at it as a really challenging time and challenging environment. If you're responsible for identifying, what's the best projects to put forward for leadership to look at, and what are the business investments, right? Like projects and programs are really business investments for the company, and how do you kind of launch and extend the capability of the business, help them to your business partners to be to appreciate and extend it and be successful in the business. So I look at, project and program managers are the ones who are working really hard to kind of make the business successful. Now, you're responsible for identifying the projects that meet the business needs, right? And what are the business investments you should be doing? Why should you be doing it? What's the ROI of those investments? Because it takes a lot of time and money as well too. and then also and resources as well too. And the challenge is that a lot of the challenges that we face is that there are a lot of tools out there that you work with, especially with like and I threw up a couple of logos up here because I'm sure a lot of you may have seen this, like Microsoft Dynamics or Salesforce for your CRM tools. Full Circle Insights or Visible might be some other tools that you might kind of look at as well too, and then to kind of measure your customer outcomes as well too. Marketo for your marketing, automation and analytics as well too. And then you've got Tableau, and Tableau is a great enterprise analytics tool as well too. My point is, I'm sure I'm missing hundreds or if not thousands of other software tools out there. But my point really is to think about, how hard it is for you to kind of every month or every quarter to kind of pull all of the information together from different sources. And it just becomes really difficult to kind of report back on what's going on with your projects, right? And so, anyways, one interesting stat that I learned and talked to a number of customers and companies over the years is that over 80% of companies plan for the projects and spend the time kind of justify why they should be doing the projects, but they never go back to measure those outcomes and the ROI. Did that yield the results of what of those investments? And so anyways, I am curious from the poll, what do you guys go back and measure the outcomes of your projects? And I know, Bill, did you set up the poll out there?
I did, yeah, I did, and folks can respond in the chat box. We can see that chat box. So,
okay,
yes, the poll is up there, and let's see the results of that poll.
Oh, one person said yes.
Awesome. One person said yes. Perfect.
So statistically, we're right about 80%. That's awesome. That is awesome. That's great. Okay. So let me kind of continue. This is good. And this ties to the number that I've heard, and with a lot of companies just never going back to measure. So let me kind of tell you what the business challenge and what we hear. So if you can imagine, really, a lot of times when the investments, right, we often hear from executives that they don't understand, appreciate, why we're doing this project. What's that going to impact? How is it going to impact the business performance? And they don't see that visibility of what outcomes it's going to impact. We often talk in terms of projects, and if I think of IT projects, right? I remember for companies that I had worked with before, I always get, why does it cost so much, and why does it take so long? And so those are things that the challenges that I see as a program manager or a project manager. You always get those types of questions of not truly understanding why is this important, and how is that going to help the overall organization. The other thing too is like visibility. Is tied to not only just kind of helping you to kind of justify the budgets, the head count, but the visibility of when is this going to have an impact, what not, and then like I said, the cost and the time, appreciating the complexity of these projects as well too. So those are kind of things that we hear of business challenge. I'll share two more as well too. Alignment, execution as well too. So in terms of alignment, what we often hear is that, and I've seen many times, is that there are a lot of projects that are in flight, and at the beginning of the year, everything is great. It's we start up the new year and we start executing on those projects, but comes along, the business changes, the leadership says, hey, I got this new other project to work on, it's a higher priority, and we get kind of distracted by a number of other projects going on at the same time. And so that's a big challenge of like, how do you prioritize which ones, and how do you kind of keep track of all those projects? If I start working on this new request or new project, how do I get to and do I drop the other one, and how's that going to impact the plan overall? And we often hear that by the end of the if you look back by the end of the year, where you thought you were going to go on the path to the left, you somehow get distracted with all the what I call paper cuts and new shiny objects, and you end up going to the somewhere to the right. And so what what we try to do is like help you to kind of figure out what, as a program manager, as a program director of a PMO organization, to how to do you make sure that organizations align and the people who are working on your teams are still executing and working on the key priorities for the organization. As well as also, we hear the challenge that, hey, you never go back to do outcomes-based planning is because measuring the data, it takes way too long. You talk about such a manual process, and measuring measurement, if anything happens during quarterly business reviews, it just takes a lot of time. I often hear preparing for a quarterly business review takes 1 or 2 weeks to prepare for, and in a quarter, that's like 1/6 of your entire quarter, and that takes way too much time and effort. So those are kind of the challenges of why should you consider outcomes-based planning and making it easier as well too. Now, if you think about this, what are symptoms? And I'm going to share a whole bunch of them. If we don't do outcomes-based planning, I'll give you a couple of examples and what I've heard from and shared. If you don't do outcomes-based planning, there's a whole concept of a management concept called fast fail. And this is what the premise of outcomes-based planning is about: being able to measure quickly what the outcomes of your projects. And therefore, if you are able to measure those outcomes quickly, you can feel more at ease of whether or not you should take this risk of executing and trying a hypothesis or assumption for doing a project, right? A new investment. And if it's not yielding the results, that's okay, because you have the data to quickly measure and make sure that you're hitting on you're measuring those outcomes. And if it's not hitting those results that you were expecting, you should stop it, save the money, and without hesitation, and move on. But what if you don't do that, right? And if you don't do the outcomes-based planning, well, you're now placing big bets, and you don't know what's going on. And so, therefore, some of the problems we see is that really you become slow to execute because you're not sure if I should put all my eggs in one basket. Am I going to risk my neck and kind of push for this project when I'm not sure what the outcomes or results will be? And so therefore, if you're slow to execute, you're also more likely to be risk averse too. You're not willing to take chances, and therefore, and the organization is not willing to experiment and innovate. And then, there's more analysis paralysis as well too. And so, when you don't have all the information, you're not willing to make these decisions, and you try and stall, right? And I've seen so many companies doing that, stalling and just kind of saying, well, if we give a little bit more time, we might be able to see the results out of this, right? And then repeated failure. This really talks about the fact that, how often, when we don't go back and kind of learn from our mistakes, we just kind of keep repeating, and we keep kind of doing more projects, and we keep building on top of that. And we just don't learn from our past mistakes if we don't look at and measure the outcomes as well too. And and just doing the same thing. I've talked to executives like CEOs or COOs, and they say, boy, I'm comfortable with our success, and and just doing the same old thing. What has made our company really successful? Boy, we just keep doing the same thing, and it's all good, right? But the thing is that the business, the environment, the outside world is changing constantly, and so how do you kind of stay on top of things? And so if you find your organization kind of keep repeating the same thing, doing the same thing, and even though you might be successful, but you don't measure the outcomes or do experimentation and innovate, I think that you are either growing or you're dying, right? And which leads to my next slide. What is the impact, really? You're growing or you're dying, and as a leader, as a project manager or a program manager, I look at you guys as business leaders as well too, right? you are either growing or dying, and which one are you? And how do you influence your organization to change and to be able to innovate? The other thing too is that loss of business because you're not excuse me, there's a you lose your business slowly, not overnight, but because you're operating in the old ways of not able to innovate and come up with new ideas to experiment. And I'll give an example of innovation, right? I mean, you look at Uber changing and experimenting compared to cabs and taxis and limo services, right? How have they changed and experimented, a whole new business concept? And it's based on the fact that, the taxi industry has been around for, decades, hundreds of years. But the whole business model was switched because, several people were willing to kind of experiment and try, will this work? Does this tap into a whole new business model for us and try this out because of the frustration with using cab services and how expensive and how it's not efficient, right? And those are where great ideas come out of because they're willing to experiment and try new things and build it. And Uber wasn't like an overnight success, but it started years ago and then quickly piled on and then kind of experimented and measure those outcomes. Did it give me the success I was looking for? And did it kind of drive and allowed me to kind of move forward and build upon the success? And whatever didn't work, it's okay. I'll experiment and I'll keep trying and grow my business that way. The other thing too is that, if you keep doing this kind of like, I call it, the waterfall project management, right? A lot of times you might see that you're missing your goals. You're not achieving your objectives because you're not measuring those outcomes. You're not pivoting and you're assessing where you're at and how to make changes to your projects or to initiatives. And so therefore you might be kind of not, and you won't be hitting your goals. And the last one is really, I've seen this in quite a few organizations, right? Everybody wants to be on a winning team. And if you keep missing your goals, the business not doing well, it's not innovative, it's not exciting, then you kind of lose, you lose a lot of talent. And in this economy and this climate right now, especially where Bill and I are at in Seattle, boy, you could lose your people so fast. In fact, currently working with a company right now where they're like not, and we're helping them. I'm helping them with just kind of elevating and identifying what their goals and strategies are. And then because they're losing, their middle management team and a lot of their developers within their organization, and they can't figure, and they're just like not innovating and not hitting their goals. So therefore, they're just losing a lot of people. So this is a very real problem that we have seen a number of times. Now, let me not kind of dwell on like what's the downside, but let me share with you a story about a company and why they're doing this. The company I'm sure you guys heard of is Amazon, right? And and it's a great story to share with you, a case study, an example to kind of share with you on this one. Now, Amazon, I was just having a conversation and I came up with this analogy and this story because one of my customers that I was talking to, and he said to me, Keck, have you been working with Amazon? I said, yeah, we've been talking with them, but why do you ask? And I thought it was kind of a strange question. And he said, well, the way that you're describing outcomes-based planning really sounds like what the Amazon process is about. And I thought about that and I was like, wow, that's a great analogy and a great story to share. And I started, and I agree with that actually. So let me kind of share with you Amazon, right, and what they're about. You guys have, and the reason why Amazon is not the only case, there are other companies, but why I bring up Amazon is that they're not just a technology company, but they're really an innovation. I call it an innovation company, right? And if you think about this, over 10 years, they've been around for over 10 years now. They started selling books first, right? And books And then suddenly, over the years, they added a whole bunch of things that we all know of now, right? All types of different goods. They, it's not just about the technology; it's about logistics too, of what they do with their 2-day shipping. They created the Amazon Web Services. They created the Kindle, Alexa, grocery, Amazon Fresh as well too. And why do I bring this up is that because everybody thinks that, oh, they're a technology company, but I actually think that they're more in a company that's built to innovate, right? And they're always bring new ideas, new markets, or new products to the marketplace, new services to the marketplace that has nothing to do with technology. What does 2-day shipping have to do with that? What does Amazon their their airplane services, their transportation have to do with technology? And my point is that it's not about it's not really about the technology, but it's about the framework in which they work in. And I'll share with you a little a well-known fact, if you don't know already, is that what they've done is that they've created how they create a product or bring a product or service to market is that they begin with the end in mind. They kind of like to say, what is it? If you can imagine for a sec, if you were to come up with an idea, what would your press release look like for that product, for that service? Now, if you can imagine, excuse me, what does that end in mind look like? So what features would you have in there? How would you describe that to the customer? So if you think about your projects too, the same thing. How would you kind of share that newsletter release internally to your organization? What would you tell them for them to be excited about? What are the outcome you're looking for? Then, they start kind of building the requirements and what the metrics should be. And then they start kind of sharing, then start building the requirements and the design and so forth, right? And everybody does that. But again, it's really about the end in mind, setting those goals and what that press release looks like, if you can imagine that, and what those targets, and then kind of be able to start building backwards of how to build and deliver on a project, how to deliver on a program launch or anything that way, right? And so what's the result? So this company started in 1994. So they've been around for a long time. Now, if you can imagine this, they've surpassed Walmart, which is the largest retailer in the world, back in 2015. And now they're the fourth most valuable company in the world, which is crazy. With their stock prices hovering close to $1,000 per share. And nobody would have seen that years ago. And over the past 10 years, they've sustained a 30% year-over-year growth over the past 10 years. And so if there's anything to kind of encourage you guys to kind of consider what that means about why you should kind of adopt this framework, boy, the Amazon story is one that's really compelling to me, right? There are other companies too, and I'll share with you, and I'll name a couple that do this type of like planning and execution as well too. One is GE, especially with the innovation labs that they have. And then another company is 3M as well too, with their products, with the chemicals, this Post-its, as well as those sticky non-stick pads as well too. So anyways, so I want to kind of share why some of these case studies, especially Amazon, which is a great one that really blows my mind and many others of how they've been able to maintain that level of success over the years. Now, how do you start this, right? Or how the Amazon process? Let me kind of dwell a little bit about this. So I told you that, a lot of companies, I'll share with you, a lot of companies, they plan, and they typically kind of plan using a part, of what business investments they're looking at, right? They plan through, you kind of model that out through your Excel spreadsheets, and you kind of do your PowerPoint presentation to kind of get everybody aligned to your to buy into the idea and the concept and so forth, right? And then they start executing, and you may use your Microsoft projects of the world. You might use your, different like liquid planners or rakes or whatever, and you start executing those projects there, right? I would tell you that's where most people drop off at that point in time. They don't go optimize, they don't go back and result. And you guys kind of in the poll shared and kind of affirmed some of what we've experienced and heard from other companies. They never go back and measure, right? What the Amazon process, I remember, as I was kind of telling you, this graphic here is that you should begin with the end in mind. What is it that your outcomes that you want to be looking at? What's that press release that you're going to look at the end of the project, right? And what you're going to share with the rest of the organization, and whether it be internal customers or external customers, what are you going to share with them? Why should they be excited? And and why a press release is a great idea is because it's short, it's succinct, and then you start looking at what can we measure and what's the outcomes that we want to plan for, and then and dust those PowerPoints and Excel spreadsheets, but really plan out those metrics and goals around that, and start executing, and then measuring those outcomes and fine tune that. Because the first time you get out of, if you look back at this, what you plan and what you deliver often may not meet the needs of the customer, your internal customer, your external customers. So you always have to adjust and make changes. And that's why it's important to be able to measure those outcomes and adjust and keep changing and pivoting and make sure that you get it right. And so that's the whole process. I call it, in fact, I'm writing an article called the Amazonian Process in a blog in the next week or so. So I'm about to release that. And so if you guys are interested, I'll encourage you guys check out my LinkedIn or my website later on, and and kind of keep track of some of those kind of blog posts as well too, about some of these topics as well too. So where do you start on this, right? So I believe in, I'm showing you some screenshots of my software, but my point is not about the software really. It's about how you should get started for your organization. Really begin with the end in mind, with what are your goals, your strategy, your goals for each of the for the organization, for each of the teams. If you can capture that and cascade that down, right? And if you look at this, it's like, if you look at this kind of diagram here, the GTB, grow the business, as one of the objectives out there, right? And you break it down, how are you going to grow the business? What does that mean to the development team or the IT organization, to engineering and to sales? And how do you kind of break that out within the development team? What does that mean to them? Like if you say, I often get, in the early days in working with the customer, I always get the kind of like, okay, our goal is to double the revenue for the company, or to increase or double the market share of our business, right? But to the IT organization, to the engineers of the world, does that mean that we deliver twice as many projects? Does it for a developer or within your team? Does that mean that I code twice as fast to hit that goal? No, it's really about how do I understand, if our overall company's goals and objectives, is to double the revenue, or is to increase the market penetration and market share. How do I really make it meaningful? What does that mean for a developer? Does that mean that I need to focus on certain key metrics or key deliverables that will help grow that business? And how do I make it meaningful for each of my organization, each of my teams, and and departments as well too? And so, and when you do that, then when you make it meaningful, then you can understand, okay, well, if you look at the upper right quadrant of the screenshot here, then you can set up different targets as well too. What are targets for people who's responsible for marketing on number of customer visits? What does that mean from a sales? How's that going to influence revenue as well too? And you have cross-functional, different targets for cross-functional goals and teams as well too. And so if you can start with that first. And so the thing is that I use an acronym. I share that with everybody to kind of help them define what are SMART goals. And I'm sure you guys have heard of that. If not, let me kind of explain to you what that is. It stands for, and there's slightly different variations of this, but SMART stands for specific, measurable, and actionable or attainable and relevant goal, relevant. And the last one, the T, stands for time bound as well too, time bound goals. And so basically, it needs to be something concrete, something that you can measure, right? Outcomes based, that you can take action on. It cannot be something that's lofty. And often this is the problem when I gave you the example of talking about, hey, we want to double the revenue for the company. From an engineer, from a developer, from an IT, or from a marketing, what does that mean to me? And so what will happen is then you'll probably disregard that because it doesn't, it's not specific to you and it's not actionable for you if you're in IT and you're a software engineer and developing that, right? It's not relevant for me. So you gotta break it down, those goals, and make it something that's, like I said, specific, measurable, actionable, or attainable, relevant, and time-bound goals. And lastly, I'll throw it in there. Does it make you passionate about these goals too? You've got to be passionate about what you're trying to achieve for. Because if you're not passionate about it, you won't, and you're not willing to kind of get up in the morning and go after this, then it's going to be, that's not the right goals, right? And so therefore you got to get the team aligned to these strategic goals and the targets that you're trying to hit for, right? And you want the team to be excited about that. And I think that's so important. And so often, leadership would just come up with a whole number of goals and metrics and say, go forth and make it happen. And, the rest of the organization is not following with them, right? And that's where failure starts with that. So next, how in terms of getting it started. So here's where my recommendation, all right? My recommendation for your organization and what that looks like. So every organization goes through a strategy, and at least once a year. If not, maybe they'll do a mid-year replan as well too, right? What's the strategy? What's the goals and objectives for the organization, and what are the targets, the KPIs that we're going to hit and we're going to kind of measure success on, whether it's successful or not. It's and if you use the SMART goals, those are where that comes in. And then you're going to plan and say, okay, well, we've got these targets that we're going to achieve. What investments, what projects are we going to start executing in order to hit those goals? What are we going to change in our organization? What are we going to invest in, right? And then you're going to, as project, and that's where program planning and project, program planning starts here, right? And then from execution, then that's where project planning, a project manager comes in and starts executing, delivering on those projects. And the optimized piece is that, if you go back and measure those results, how am I doing? It's not just tracking and monitoring progress of, am I tracking on this project? It's also tracking those outcomes, those results, those KPIs. Does it fit? Does it, is that what our customers want? And, and is that resonating with them, right? And is it impacting, And it's not just a qualitative, hey, do you like what I'm delivering for you? Is it really truly measuring the impact of those goals that we started off at the beginning of the year, right? So how do you break it down? I break it down into three separate areas. Strategy, right? Defining what those goals and objectives are, and kind of defining what those KPIs, how you're going to measure against that. And what you are doing here is really kind of tracking against, helping your team to kind of track those, align the teams and the organization to the relevant goals, objectives. It helps you through KPIs to track and measure that. It's because in your day-to-day work that you're working on, you might sometimes lose track of like what's the strategy, and you're not worried about that, right? And the goals and objectives. This is the way to kind of help your day-to-day work that you're working on and be connected to those strategic goals. If you know what the KPIs and what the targets are, then the team will be able to hit on those and be top of mind all the time, right? Boy, are we short on this? Are we killing it, or are we kind of short on it? and do I kind of pick up the pace, right? That's why you need to kind of start with that end in mind. And then from a planning perspective, now once you know what your strategy, the KPIs that are relevant for the business, then when you start planning your projects, and the programs around that, you kind of need to understand what are those outcomes that you're kind of making trade-offs with. And then there will be trade-offs in resources and costs as well too. And you kind of measure the impact, right? And here I put about revenue impact as well. And then that's the planning piece of it. And then the last one is really the monitoring the progress and tracking this. And I would encourage you at a minimum on a, if not a weekly basis, but on a monthly basis to kind of keep tracking on results as you're building. And, I don't know if all of you, depending on your background, if you've heard of agile development, right? For the folks who are responsible for IT development and project agile project methodology, you're building incrementally, right? And you're building things incrementally in the project. But what happens is that we still operate in this waterfall methodology mindset because we never look at back and measure those outcomes. What I'm kind of encouraging you guys to do is like really look at the agile methodology, not just for delivering on a project, but also from a measurement and management perspective, also to measure those outcomes as you go along as well too. So now, let me kind of give you a couple of examples of the strategy piece, right? This is what, and I'll share with you a screenshot here, and why I'm sharing you a couple of screenshots there. And as I kind of start wrapping up on some of the this discussion here, what I'm showing you here is really a dashboard, a simple dashboard. It does not have to be complicated, right? All it needs to do in this example here is really a dashboard that for your team, for your executives to look at on a weekly or a monthly basis to kind of say, what are the metrics? What are we hitting on right now? And what are we red, yellow, green? And, in this example here in our software there, we show the red, yellow, green based on what you're achieving. And then we show the spark line of the last 6 periods of how you are achieving those results as well too. This is simple that if you have your if you first of all lay out your goals and the cascade plan, now you have the targets that you're shooting for and you're measuring this on an ongoing basis. At the very least, guys, if I were to ask you guys to kind of get you guys started, this would be the very least that I would say, put these metrics in front of everybody's eyes and on a screen where you're sharing this with your team on a daily basis or a weekly basis on a TV screen and monitor when you're walking down the hallway, poster boards or something like that. But it gets everybody to be aligned on those are the most important things for our organization. And here's how it's relevant for you guys and how we're progressing against that. And if you do that, you'll see a lot of changes in itself already. And then from a planning perspective, I'll share with you this one here. What this shows in this graphic here is really, again, I take it from, I'm happy to share with you guys, how you do it on spreadsheets as well too. But, we do this in our software, and I'm sure you guys do a portfolio kind of thing. And this, I look at when you're planning your portfolio for your projects and tracking at this, you typically look at your priority and you look at your business value, the ROI, right? And that's really important as you kind of look at what's your priority. And so in this diagram here, you got the blue and kind of like the orange colored ones, right? The blue is really the approved projects that your team's currently working on, right? And so you can kind of, if you look at the Gartner's Magic Quadrant, you want to be working on projects in the upper right quadrant, higher priority, higher value. By the way, the circles, the size of circles really indicate the cost of the project in our system. So you can kind of disregard that bubble, size of the bubble. And the orange is really what's coming down the pipeline. And in terms of what's coming down the pipeline for new project requests coming from business. And the idea behind this graphic, and you show it to your executives, and we share that often, it's a powerful graph, is because you can show to your teams, to your executives, to your leadership, and to your business partners, hey guys, this is what we're working on. This is, what we're currently working on. And so we have enough capacity to work on maybe one more project. So which one should it be? Should it be the one that's, low value, or should I kind of go, even though the priority may not be high, should I be working on the, higher value project there, right? So this is kind of help you align your organization and focus on the right priorities as well too, right? And then lastly, I'll share with you this one last example as well too. This is what I mean by example of how you can do this on a spreadsheet, and happy to kind of share with you too. So this is an example of outcomes-based planning at its best, right? Here is one metric that we measure on, one KPI. There's, and you can kind of do it on a spreadsheet as well too. But we just can do it a lot faster and pivot this. But here's one example. The orange here shows all of these are individual projects itself, right? And if you look at this view here, these are your organizational goals, right? Customer growth, customer acquisition, technical growth, and then customer driven. So it could be different for your organization. It really could vary for your organization. But if my goal is to influence and improve on net promoter score as one of the key metrics that I'm responsible for, here are all the projects that I'm doing right now as an organization to influence this metric here. And when I talk about outcomes-based, let me kind of explain a little bit about this chart here. There's a lot of wealth of information here. The smaller metrics here in this screen here are what's the original plan during the planning, the end in mind. What are the metrics that we are shooting for as an organization for this project? So that's the, when you kind of justify your project, you say, I think that this project is going to impact the net promoter score and deliver these results by the end of this project. And the top number is your actuals. And then the orange shaded numbers are right now the ones that are actuals. And then the yellow is more the forecast numbers, the larger numbers. So quickly, I can see on this is like, so a couple of questions I'm going to ask, your executive. Hey, I'm responsible, I'm the executive sponsor for this key metric, the net promoter score. What projects are we working on today? What are we doing? And I can quickly, you can quickly then kind of say, well, we've got 4 projects, but I'm not sure if we're investing enough, because if you look at this, I only have 2 projects that's really ultimately delivering an impact starting in February, but the other projects don't really impact until second half of the year, right? And by the way, this navigation redesign for our website is not hitting the goals. Should we keep going with it? Should we adjust on it? Should we stop this project and work on something else? Right? And so those are the questions that, you want to be able to kind of have that type of discussion and stop. You don't want to be waiting till the end of December and say, oops, we totally missed our targets. You want to be, by the end of June, do it, at least on a quarterly basis, if not a monthly basis, go back and share and say, should we keep going? Should we stop? Should we make adjustments to this? Right? And that's how you're going to really become a hero within your organization, to kind of help understand the ROI and track it on an ongoing basis. And you can kind of keep, and you can keep making changes within your organization, right? And kind of deliver successful results. Because the first time you do this, it won't be perfect. But what we're helping you, and it's not rocket science, it's just, getting out and doing this. It's really, how do you keep adjusting and making changes to your assumptions based on data-driven information, right? So why do this? I kind of hit on that already. It's really about increasing innovation. And so because, if you've got more data and if you feel more at ease that, hey, if I get the results, I can actually take more risks and come up with new ideas. And it might be crazy ideas, but you know what? It's it's worth taking a risk and being more innovative, especially if the executive team knows that you're not going to waste $10 million. The most that you might waste at the end of the project, even though it might cost $10 million to build this, but you're not going to waste the entire thing on an unproven result. You might end up burning $1 million, which is way less less costly than burning $10 million and saying, oops, at the end of the year, right? What you're trying to do is kind of say to your executive team is like, I can provide you, yes, you should give me $10 million for this project, and here are the plan results. And by the way, your downside, if it's not proving out, it's actually only $1 or $2 million. So this is why you should invest on this, right? It's going to give us huge returns. And I'm managing your risk, your downside of this, right? So you're basically managing the risk out of doing this, right? And so then you're basically helping your organization to really embrace risk and taking more risk, but it's a calculated risk, right? And then allows you to innovate more. And ultimately, what you want to drive for is more success and growth for the organization, and then also alignment for your company as well, to kind of focus on the right key goals and objectives, and have an awesome, high performing organization. I mean, who can complain about, a crazy success like an Amazon company, right? So with that, I will ask if there are any questions on this. And Bill, are there any questions that you see out there? Bill, can you hear me?
Sorry, I was talking on mute. Yes, so we'll go to the chat, see if there's any questions. We also said that we would offer and do a nice offer at the end, so I've turned that offer on. So Keck is going to offer a free consulting session.
Yeah.
For 2 folks.
Okay, so
and so I put all the details there.
Okay, yeah. So what I'm offering, guys, is thank you first of all for spending the time with me this morning, for me to share with you about this whole concept of outcomes-based planning, and hopefully you can hear from me why I'm very passionate about this, right? And so this is something I do with our clients, and it's a consulting session. It's a planning session to get started. It's not about, it's not about software or anything like that. It is about your organization. So if you guys are interested and you find, I will submit your email address or email me, and I'll share that with you. Actually, it's on the screen here, info@plancube.com. Send me an email with your name and
tell them you were part of the webinar.
Yep, and exactly. And send me your contact information, and I'll be choosing 2 people out of this group to really, what I plan to do with this is with you, is to spend a 60 to 90 minute session. And if you guys are in Seattle, meet up in person. But if not, we'll do a web conference. And just to kind of help you kind of think about what does that mean for your organization, how do you get started, as well to help you to set those goals. I know sometimes it's really challenging to get started with that. And what are the relevant targets to kind of measure those outcomes as well too, right? And how do you and we can talk a lot about that. And I think usually once you kind of define that, then I've got also, and then I'll share with you some templates as well too, out of this session too. So if you guys,
Keck?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Keck Miguel's got a question. What do you think is the most important metric or KPI for an organization?
Boy, I'm gonna Miguel, tell me, share with me. Sorry, I just accidentally hit my out of the presentation mode.
Just keep that. Yeah, there you go.
Miguel, what industry are you in? Can Miguel talk, or pharmaceutical?
He's chatting.
Okay, yeah. Okay. For pharmaceutical, I'll be interested, and definitely I need to learn more about your organization. But some of the things that I think is about outcomes, health outcomes, right, and results of and again, depending on what role you're in as well too. Like if you're doing pharmaceutical and you're doing a lot of drug testing and validation and bringing drugs and pharmaceutical drugs to the market, Is it about the health outcomes that you're trying to look for? And then also, and I can share with you also in my past, I actually worked with a pharmaceutical testing company as well too. And so it's about, the results of the health outcomes, looking at the effectiveness of the drugs as well. I'm sure those are kind of things that you already look at as well too, right? I'm reading your question. Execs usually one slide page deck telling most of the science of portfolio. Absolutely. And so Miguel, I would say absolutely. So some of the things that we look at, kind of recommend, and I kind of do a scorecard that looks at the health of the projects, the health of the business, right, and then also the health of of the investments or the initiatives as well too. I can spend more time just to I need to kind of sit down and kind of better understand from a pharmaceutical what are the key goals and objectives for your companies, and then define those targets. And that's the starting point, to be honest with you, right? So if you're, so sign up if you're interested, and send me a note on that one, and I can share with you a simple way, a spreadsheet template to kind of get you guys started on doing that.
All right, Keck, we got another question. It's over in the questions. Is there a common expected percentage of gains you might see for organizations who work with outcome-based planning?
Gosh, that's a
Common expected percentage.
Yeah. I would say to you, in terms of Chase, that's a great question. You should kind of look at, from my experience, anywhere from, I would say, and I'm going to go round down and be conservative, anywhere from 10 to 25% is what we have seen, right? And that's more in terms of gains, in terms of delivering more effectively on your projects, and actually not having missed targets and objectives out of it as well too. And I'm being conservative here because I'm not even looking at like, hey, what does success mean versus failure as well too, right? And that's, everybody will say that, oh, that's hard to measure. So I say, in terms of making sure that you can deliver on time and delivering quickly on and successfully versus having a failed project. That's 10 to 25% is what we've seen and talked to customers about.
Awesome.
Okay, so yes, please, if you are interested in this session and you want to chat some more, please do that and send me an email, and happy to work and give you a very customized kind of planning session and just going to help you set up. So Miguel, for your part, if you're interested, sign up and let's continue this discussion as well too. Thanks everyone for your time, and have a great morning or afternoon. Take care. Bill?